broadcast, I did mention that it is unfathomable to be hearing that individuals allied to the opposition political parties have been going missing for the last couple of years when it comes to politics. The most recent of those of that issue is the 2020 November protest when Robert Chagulanyi was actually heading over to Luka. Yes, 54 people died. The president said they would be compensated. Up to date, we haven't seen any of that taking center stage. And we also do know that many of the NUP supporters were also arrested, and there was also a ripple effect in that regard where the security agencies continued picking up these individuals. The president came out and said on the US-Africa summit sidelines that he did not know of any of these machinations taking center stage within his own country. Security Minister, retired Major General, that is Jim Muhezi, also came out and said we do not have the details of those particular individuals that the NUP leadership claims to have been abducted or being held incommunicado by the security forces. So in tandem, he did mention that they cannot look for someone whose details they do not have. So you, as a viewer, do you actually believe the security agencies do not have those details? Do you actually believe someone with all the cameras that we have within the city and spread all over the country that they didn't see any of these individuals take the NUP or opposition political supporters and they do not know where they are or do not have the details? Let me know on our social media pages, that is NTV Uganda, Facebook, Twitter, and also YouTube. We shall actually largely focus on the Human Rights Enforcement Act of 2019, which President Museveni assented to in March of that very year, 2019. According to that law, actually, if I've been taken incommunicado and held in a jail setting, and then I'm violated, I'm tortured, I do have torture marks all over my body. If I'm presented in court, the High Court actually has the mandate to throw out that case under that prerogative that I was tortured before, going for trial in that regard. And also the Act puts a time frame on when people who are supposed to be compensated should be given their money in that regard. But why is that not happening? Why is it that since 2020 some people haven't been compensated? And a host of issues that we are going to be discussing with Mr. Lubega, Jonathan, a legal officer working with the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. A very good morning, Lubega. A pleasure to have you on this morning show.
Pleasure is mine too. Good morning, all of you viewers. I'm delighted to be part of this discussion today.
When we talk about human rights, what are human rights in that regard? Let us kick off with the most basic of questions.
Yeah, I think in this regard, human rights as it is, these are entitlements which everyone is entitled for by virtue of them being a person or a human. So everyone is required to have those human rights. That is what human rights is.
So what are the major threats to human rights within this festive season?
In this festive season, we are seeing threats that have been rampant even over the past years. For instance, we have violations of women's rights against land. We have evictions that are going to take place. We have violations that are taking place in instances. For example, you see persons are violated, are stopped to carry out their trade because this is, anyone is entitled to do their trade because it is a constitutional mandate and everyone is entitled to do that. So we are going to see such threats that are happening, and we have to come clear and show that no, if it happens, we are enshrined and we are captured within the legal frameworks to look for redress in that regard.
And indeed, this show is known for current affairs. We are very huge on that, and you just give us a brief account of how we are doing as a country when it comes to human rights observation in that regard. But then you can take us back in time, 1962 at least, when we took over from the whites, and tell us what happened within the Obote 1 administration, Amin, Obote 2, those human rights violations that actually occurred during those tenures. Are they still pretty much prevalent right now? Give us a brief account of where we've come from as a nation.
Yes, thank you, Romeo. I believe that the issue of human rights has been dated back in 1962, even beyond 1962. Human rights have been violations have been recurrent, and we are privileged that in the 1995 we were clear that the constitution that was developed in that year, 1995, gave us a mandate to protect our rights under Chapter 4. And this chapter is clear, and it spells out every human rights entitlement.
So human rights observation actually became a reality under President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni during his tenure.
Exactly.
We didn't see that before.
Before it wasn't, and it wasn't clearly protected. But then here we are seeing that the 1995 of the Constitution is clear under Chapter 4, and it has very many provisions that are clear under that. For instance, we can say Article 20 is also very good in that regard, that everyone is entitled to human rights. No discrimination, that is under Article 21. So everyone is entitled. And looking into that same regard, however, we are seeing that, yes, even if it is clearly spelled out under the Constitution, statistics are very worrying that 90% of the people, especially in rural communities, cannot access justice. This is worrying, even if we have clearly shown that under the Constitution we have these rights that are protected. The rate at which violations are being conducted, it is worrying. And so it is our call that...
Would you attribute that to our citizens in this country not knowing about the law itself? That if I go to a police station and I report, I could get some kind of remedy. The Constitution does not allow what has just happened to me. Could that be the reason? Ignorance?
Yeah, ignorance. This issue is twofold, if I'm to say. It is about ignorance of the citizens, knowing about their rights and where to seek justice. And secondly, it is about also the failure of the duty bearers to show and also to carry out their duty of protecting them. For example, if one is meant to go and seek justice at police or in the courts of law, they ought to protect them. However, then we see that even if someone has gone there to seek justice, we see that even the other end, violations are still recurrent. So it is twofold in our perspective. Yes, and in that regard, we see that, yes, even if ignorance is there, it is our duty as the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights at CEFROT, we put it to ourselves to create awareness on this law that was promulgated by the President of Uganda in 2019. It is very clear, a beautiful law that anyone can use to go and seek justice, even if you cannot speak English like lawyers in court, even if you cannot write like lawyers do write pleadings in court, anyone can go and without any technicalities.
And of course, we did talk about our individuals not knowing information about the law. Please, break it down. The Human Rights Enforcement Act of 2019, what is it and what should Ugandans know about this particular law?
Thank you. About this law, this is the law that was that came up to specifically respond to the enforcement of Article 50 of the Constitution, because previously Article 50 did not have a law that puts it into effect, and it was also that Article 50 where a person could only go and access justice before the High Court only. However, we are seeing that this Human Rights Enforcement Act goes beyond to say that even if your rights rather are violated, you can go and seek you seek justice in the magistrate's court. And it is also eminent that clear that few high courts are in Uganda, but the magistrates' courts are very close to people and very close to the rural people whose rights are majorly violated. And I think that by the virtue of having the Human Rights Enforcement Act, which puts into effect of Article 50, we see that these rights under the Constitution will be protected. Yes.
Help the viewer understand that there's a provision within that act that actually entails that if someone has been tortured while they are being held in a jail setting, if they are taken to court and indeed the judge sees that they do have hallmarks of torture all over their bodies, that trial has to be nullified. But the government has not implemented any of that, especially when it comes to the NUP supporters who have been showing up in many of the court jurisdictions with hallmarks of torture on their bodies. None of that has been borrowed. Maybe what the government has borrowed from that act could be holding officials of human rights violations accountable for their actions. But when it comes to nullifying such trials where people's rights were violated, that hasn't been implemented. What exactly does that mean for my people?
I can say that violations of human rights also are divided into different segments. We have the political rights, and also we have the social and economic rights. And if you look at the social and economic rights, I can't say that the government has not protected any. And I would be wrong to say that it has not put into effect the human rights entitlements of people. But be it as it may, we have to look at where we need to see ourselves as a country. If someone is being abducted or even kept incommunicado from the public or from their families, what should that person do? And because this is clear that when you look at also chapter 4 of the Constitution, it is clear that one has to have a fair hearing, and also you have to be before court in 48 hours. So many people should be this should be kept at the face of everyone, as I said before, that the rights holders and also the duty bearers. So how should someone demand for their rights? Because beyond giving you the right to be heard, or even you being required to appear or before court in that required time, what do you have to put into consideration, and how do you go before court to demand that? So we see that it is very worrying. Yes, we see that very many violations are taking place in the political space.
But what the viewer wants to know, are those trials being held illegally? Are they illegal trials under the prerogative that these individuals were tortured first before actually being taken in court? Are they null and void?
Yeah, court has pronounced itself on such an incident where someone is being violated or being tortured. We see that it is immediately, court has been clear on that, that if that is brought before court's knowledge during trial, it is null and void. It has been clear, and even the act itself, it is under, if I'm to say, it is under Section 4, which provides for the right for the High Court to hear and determine human rights cases. And you know, going forward, these issues should be looked at holistically, and what causes them. You know, we may discuss them. As I said, that we have political and social, so we need to be clear and frequent on this.
And indeed, 2020, we did see people die during the November protests. They have not been compensated. The Act calls for a specific time frame within which people are supposed to be compensated. Where do you see the weaknesses in this law?
The weaknesses is, first of all, it not being made aware to the people, and also it not being made aware by the rights organs of state to make the awareness before the justice actors to know and how to properly use this law. And we believe that if these laws are made aware, you can easily seek for your rights. And many people like you say, that rights have been violated, we see it is because people cannot easily demand for those rights. But If you are made aware, you can easily demand for them.
And speaking of awareness, there's also an issue on land. Makerere University yesterday decided to come up with a master's course to actually aid that. Is more education what we need to do away with the land conflicts that we are dealing with in the country? And you can also give us a status quo on the same.
I think, yes, education, we need it. And also we need to be coming up on different fronts. And we believe that as a front, we see that we need to create awareness on how empower people to use such laws to enable them access justice. For example, we have 20% of the rights land conflicts have been reported. However, 59% of these cases have been settled, of these disputes, by jealous report, and 13%, it is worrying that these are conflicts that people have been dissatisfied with it. So looking at this, how can someone access justice in case of land violations under the Human Rights Enforcement Act? Yes.
How can they access justice? You have under 50 seconds.
Someone can access justice through appearing before the magistrate's court in writing or even orally in any language that you believe and that you know and understand very well, and then you can easily get justice, because that act alone puts it to the magistrate to note down your claim and also issue summons to the person to whom the violations has been violated, the person with whom you claim that your rights need to be sought from.
Indeed.
Yes.
Lubega Jonathan, my biggest takeaway from this conversation is ideally that we have the best laws in the land, in the region, in the world, but then implementation is actually lurking. Thank you very much, Lubega Jonathan. He is a legal officer working for the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. On that note, we've come to the end of this conversation. Let's take a breather. We'll return shortly with another conversation on tax returns.